Can you imagine never having to work again? Waking up whenever you fancy in your coordinated silk pyjamas, meeting the girls for lunch on a Tuesday morning, just because. Gold fleck facials, twice a week, buying whatever you want, whenever you want. No emails, no burnout, no spreadsheets, just softness. That is the fantasy currently taking over TikTok. A stay-at-home girlfriend. My boyfriend pays for everything. This life is the best. Right, until it isn't. Ew, what happened to you? My boyfriend left me with credit card debt and a baby and no degree because he said I didn't need it, so I should drop out. Why would he do that? Because I had a massive hemorrhage and I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Well, that's fair. Because I gave birth to his baby. Well, that wouldn't happen to me. Depending on who you ask, the stay-at-home girlfriend trend is either a feminist rebellion against hustle culture or a terrifying rebrand of economic dependence. Hello, lovely people. I'm Jessica. I make videos about pop culture and history through an LGBTQ+ and disabled lens. And hey, maybe it's because I'm a lesbian, and maybe it's because I'm disabled, but I have some really complicated thoughts about stay-at-home girlfriends. So, let's investigate. What is a stay-at-home girlfriend? Excellent question. So glad you asked. The stay-at-home girlfriend trend centres around women, usually young, conventionally attractive, heterosexual women who do not work outside of the home whilst financially supported by a boyfriend or male partner. Sometimes we don't say boyfriend because they're older. A man friend even, but they're not your friend. Oh, I met him through my cousin. They're like childhood best friends. So he's not like decades older than me or something. Not like a sugar baby. Right, and unlike trad wife content, marriage isn't always central. This is softer, younger, more aspirational. It's less submission to your husband and more I deserve softness. The content often includes luxury domesticity, hyper-feminine self-care, homemaking, emotional support labour, aesthetic routines, and really expensive apartments. And importantly, these videos are often framed as liberation from capitalist burnout, despite the wealth on display, which is understandable because many young people are exhausted on this hamster wheel and they have only just gotten on. I hated my job. One time my boss called me 12 times between midnight and 1 a.m. because I hadn't replied to her email which she sent post-work asking for figures for a presentation that she was doing 10 days later. So my boyfriend suggested just quitting work and that he would take care of me. I mean, I wasn't going to say no. Look, I get how difficult the pressures to balance everything all of the time can be. I'm a working mother of 3 children under 5. 2 of them are twins. I barely have time to wash my hair in the evenings, let alone get a nice facial. Although thankfully, I can now do that last part at home. Thanks to Verso, the sponsor of today's video, I can get a professional at-home experience with visible, lasting results. I've been using the Verso FAQ 202. It's an FDA-cleared silicone LED face mask with clinically proven results. And this may look like it's been sent from outer space, but trust me, it does wonders. Its unique flexi-fit silicone can be molded to fit any face shape. Yes, even my nose will fit in this mask. I know. The biggest nose Claudia's baby cousin has ever seen, apparently. I always prime my face using the FAQ Red Light Peptide Serum to optimize LED performance with photoreactive active ingredients. It has 8 wavelengths, including NIR. It targets every skin concern, from anti-aging, dark spots, acne, redness, and dullness. Just look at my before and after. The best part, it's ultra lightweight and wireless, so I can move around freely, whatever it is I need to do with my day, because there is only multitasking now. If you'd like to check out FAQ 202 and other Verso bestsellers, click the link in my description box and don't forget to use my code JESSICAKF for an extra 30% off on almost all Verso products. Or you can just scan this handy QR code. The code also applies to already discounted items, so you will still receive an extra 30% off. Don't miss out on this great offer. Economic precarity and fantasy domesticity. So here's the thing. This trend was not created in a vacuum. It exploded during a period of housing crisis, rising food costs, burnout culture, stagnant wages, and impossible work expectations. A 2025 report from Mental Health UK found that 9 in 10 people experienced high or extreme stress levels in the previous year, and younger workers were the most affected, with 85% reporting they were burnt out and exhausted, as reported by recruitment firm Reed. So yes, when people see someone opting out of labour entirely, it feels seductive, especially for women who are still expected to work full-time, perform femininity, maintain a home and somehow remain effortlessly beautiful. And if you have children, of course, you're the one doing or arranging all of the childcare, even if you're the one who's actually working more hours, probably for less pay. But it's okay though, because he babysits sometimes for a few hours on Saturday, so you can catch up on laundry and meal prep. So can we really be judging a fantasy that's less, I want to cook for a man, and more, I just want to stop struggling? Social media, though, is very good at monetizing fantasies, which, since over a third of Gen Z workers reported taking time off for stress in the last year, makes sense. When people fantasize getting from that point to just opting out of work entirely, yes, it's a fantasy that makes emotional sense. In her foundational 2011 book, Cruel Optimism, cultural theorist Berlant writes about cruel optimism as a relation of attachment to compromised conditions of possibility, where the object that ignites a sense of possibility actually makes it impossible to attain the expansive transformation for which a person or people risks striving. The effective structure of an optimistic attachment involves a sustaining inclination to return to the scene of fantasy that enables you to expect this time nearness to this thing will help you or a world to become different in just the right way. But again, optimism is cruel when the object that ignites a sense of possibility actually makes it impossible to attain the expansive transformation, such that a person or a world finds itself bound to a situation of profound threat that is at the same time profoundly confirming. Oh, he made me feel safe. He made me feel rich. But really, he was getting richer, as I was getting further away from any ability to support myself. Women are still earning less on average than men. The UK gender pay gap remained at 13.3% in 2023, and some projections suggest the gap may take decades to fully close. But the gender pay gap might not be closing, but the gender workforce gap is. In the early 1990s, men held nearly 7 million more jobs than women. That gap gradually shrank over the last 3 decades and is now gone. As of early 2026, women held more payroll jobs than men in the United States. Over the last 12 months in the United States, jobs held by men fell by a net 142,000, while women gained 298,000. Wait. You will note, however, that the y-axis for men has 90 at the top and 65 at the bottom, whilst the women's y-axis starts at 30 down there and only goes up to 65. Remember to check any graphs you're given, kids. Of the 1.2 million jobs added between February 2024 and February 2026, 2/3 went to women, largely due to growth in healthcare and social assistance jobs. Who are your nurses? Who are the care workers? Did you immediately picture a woman in your head when I said nurse? 22% of all jobs held by women in the UK are in health and social care. Emotionally demanding, often underpaid labour that became even more exhausting after the pandemic. But let me show you the post-1990 male-female employment gap graph. Love a good graph. Please use this for your arguments. Thank you. As you can see, or maybe not, let's zoom in. More. Yeah, there we are. There we go. Those tiny pink lines at the end show that more women than men are in the workforce. And then if we just sort of scooch over a bit, we can see, scooch, yep, that's the same thing right before the COVID pandemic. And then if we just scooch again, oh yeah, there you go, look. It's the 2008 financial crisis. I'm feeling a sense of impending doom. Same. Sorry about that. Don't worry though. Yes, this has only happened before in connection to the markets losing their minds. But also, both times it jumped back up to men being the bulk of the workforce. So, am I meant to think that one of these options is good or better or... Well, what it means is that male-dominated industries, including manufacturing and construction, are notoriously cyclical. When the economy contracts, men get hit harder. When it expands, they recover. Over the decades, the gap tended to erode rapidly during recessions and recover during economic expansions. Younger men today are less likely to be working than their fathers were at the same age, and the people supporting them are their parents or partners as they wait to re-enter the workforce. But it isn't being framed by the media as a choice in the same way that it is with stay-at-home girlfriends. And it's certainly seen as a negative or crisis, with a range of things from the opioid crisis to video games being blamed. Yet we aren't seeing that massive rise in stay-at-home boyfriend content because the women who support them are not earning on a level with the men who can afford to keep a girlfriend at home. Women make up 50.1% of the working age population globally, but only 35.4% of management positions. So, a single income in this economy? Sometimes having a single earner in the family is a necessity though. If childcare costs are higher than your mortgage and your workplace won't even give you the flexibility to promise you can be on time to pick up your children, then what can you do? Someone has to quit their job. The soft life dream is cruelly optimistic because most people cannot access it and never will. Choice versus economic dependence. Yeah. Now this is where conversations online become incredibly polarised, she said, as if the facts that I just gave you weren't also polarising. Did you know facts can be polarising now? Yes, that's what we've come to as a society. Because some people argue, if an adult woman chooses this freely, what's the problem? And genuinely, autonomy matters. Some women do feel happier outside corporate structures, but feminism has always wrestled with the difficult question. Can a choice still reinforce unequal systems? Choice does not mean immunity from critique. Economic dependence changes relationship power dynamics. Now that doesn't mean that every financially dependent relationship is abusive. My relationship with my wife was very financially lopsided at the start, in her favour. Wait, do we still call it favour if you're the one who has to go to work? She was the one who made money and I was the one with a job I was effectively paying them to let me do. But dependency always introduces vulnerability, especially if there's no marriage protection, no independent savings, no employment history, and no legal safeguards. And social media rarely discusses the less aesthetic realities. What happens after a breakup? What happens if your partner becomes controlling? What happens if you become ill? Fantasy rarely includes contingency planning, disability, and the inability to opt out. Now, here's where I think disability kind of radically changes this conversation, or at least it did for me. So, I told Claudia from the outset that we would only officially live together if we were engaged and actively planning a wedding with a date that had been set. I'd say officially because she moved into my shared student house on our third date and never left. Even though her own rented flat was much nicer. We are the lesbian U-Haul stereotype. Now, at that time, I did not really make any money other than from benefits relating to my disability. I did have a part-time job, but it paid me about the cost of getting there and eating lunch. Some of my benefits would stop as soon as I lived with a romantic partner, and others would stop when I got married. I wasn't entirely confident in my ability to find some kind of job that would work around my disabilities, which are episodic, and make it really hard to firmly plan out a day even. I don't know for which hours I will need to be flat on the floor. There will be some hours when I can't look at a screen, but I can't tell you which ones. Oh, and sometimes I paralyse my limbs. Don't panic, it's just a thing they do, because my nerves are really weird. Oh, not to mention my terrible immune system. So this was clearly pre-COVID and working from home becoming more popular. But let's not act like businesses everywhere have learnt their lessons. Oh, our employees are more productive when they're working from home and they're happier and having fewer problems with childcare or health. I don't know. They might not be wearing uncomfortable shoes. And what if they're actually getting fresh air? No, let's get them commuting 3 hours a day again. That's what will help company profits. I didn't want to be seen as not contributing to the relationship regardless of reality, and I didn't want to take away my financial safety net without knowing something would replace it. Which, by the way, is an incredibly valid thought for any disabled person because we are statistically at greater risk of financial abuse and coercive control. So that's great. I hated the thought of being a financial deadweight, especially because I knew that was how a lot of people in her life saw me, and oh, they think I'm great now. I also make twice as much money now as she did back then. I choose to believe these two things are not related. But for many disabled people, as we struggle to participate in traditional labour systems consistently, we don't really get the option to opt out of the labour market. Because for disabled people, dependency is not a fantasy. It's often a source of shame, fear, bureaucracy, or vulnerability. If you do not know the intense awfulness of being a teenager who has to depend on adults more right at the point where your peers are becoming more independent, then I am very happy for you. For me, it was like the death of an organ, which, can definitely lead to that circumstance. For me, it was just some nerves. Who needs hands that work anyway? Being a 17-year-old and having to try to relearn how to use a knife and fork? No, thank you. No, I do not want to be any more dependent on another human being than I have to be in this lifetime ever again. Thank you. But I did get to be a stay-at-home girlfriend / fiancée, but only whilst I built my own business that allowed me to work around my disabilities and have ownership, and meant that should something bad happen, I would have my own thing. And yes, I definitely pushed too hard to be seen as not a dependent sometimes, like the time I almost bankrupted myself buying a mattress because she'd bought everything else for the house and I really had to get this one thing, but then it turned out to be all of the money I had to my name. Who knew mattresses were so expensive? I know now. Disability scholar Alison Kafer in, yes, my favourite book currently, I know, I've referenced it a lot, Feminist, Queer, Crip, it's all of my things, writes about how disabled futures are frequently imagined as undesirable or economically burdensome. We understand the risks of dependence intimately. Relying on partners, family, carers, and government systems can mean reduced autonomy, whilst at the same time disabled women are statistically more vulnerable to financial abuse, coercive control, and social isolation. Yet, the stay-at-home girlfriend trend reframes dependence as beautiful, but only under very specific conditions: young, attractive, feminine, desirable. And that distinction matters, because dependency is treated very differently when attached to beauty and privilege. So when online discourse romanticizes dependence without discussing safeguards, some disabled viewers hear alarm bells, not because softness is bad, but because vulnerability without protection is dangerous. And TikTok rarely makes good contingency plans look sexy. Queer relationships and heteronormative framing. Let's gay it up a bit. Another fascinating thing about this trend is that it is overwhelmingly heterosexual. The scripts are deeply familiar. Male provider, feminine receiver. Even when these women are framing their choice as progressive or anti-capitalist, the structure itself is often profoundly traditional. You're supporting him doing his job though, you're not actually taking yourself out of consumerism entirely. Oh, except that now you have a huge gap in your CV. Queer relationships historically disrupted rigid domestic roles. Now, that's not always intentionally, sometimes simply because survival requires flexibility. Who earns? Who cares? Who cooks? Who rests? Whoever needs to right now. And that flexibility can actually be deeply liberating. Queer domesticity often has to be negotiated rather than inherited. I was having a great conversation the other day with another mum from a 2-mum family, like a mum group thing, about how to maintain equality in the relationship when one of you is breastfeeding a baby. How do you make sure that you have the same equal level of shared load when there is now this new big task that only one of you can do? And another mum, who has a husband, leant over and said, "Why does everything have to be equal?" Because that's the foundation of our relationship. Radical equality is kind of just how we do things. But relationships don't have to be equal, and parenting doesn't have to be equal. Can't one of you just be the primary parent and the other one, is sometimes there to help? Or, and bear with me, your child could be blessed enough to have 2 involved parents. Imagine. Obviously, there are many families who do not have a 2-parent structure for a multitude of reasons, and that does not in any way make them lesser families. But in the year of our Lord, 2026, to be planning for one parent to do it all and the other to sit on the sofa. What happened to feminism? Capitalism ate it, spat it back out. Jobs for everyone, but you still have to do everything you were doing before as well, obviously. Not if you're a stay-at-home girlfriend. Really? You're just repackaging old gender dynamics in aspirational language, which raises the question, is this genuinely subversive, or is it just nostalgia in a newer font? Hang on though, what was that you were saying about stay-at-home boyfriends? Because I have a gay best friend, and his boyfriend is the one supporting him. I got like a cat, my position couldn't stop you hitting. Not all queers are equal. I did not mean to imply that we were. Is this actually anti-capitalist? Who told you it was? A lot of creators frame the trend as resistance to hustle culture. And again, I understand why that resonates. Modern labour systems are brutal, but here's the contradiction. Most stay-at-home girlfriend influencers are still working. Content creation is labour. Hello. I still had to read statistics and books and sources to write a script for this video. Filming, editing, branding and promoting are all work. The aesthetic says, I've escaped capitalism. But the business model says, please engage with my monetized lifestyle content. In her work, Post-Feminist Media Culture, Elements of a Sensibility, scholar Rosalind Gill discusses how current media culture repackages structural inequality as personal empowerment and self-branding. A shift from an external, male-judging gaze to a self-policing, narcissistic gaze. I would argue that it represents a higher or deeper form of exploitation than objectification, one in which the objectifying male gaze is internalized to form a new disciplinary regime. In this regime, power is not imposed from above or from outside, but constructs our very subjectivity. Girls and women are invited to become a particular kind of self and endowed with agency on condition that it is used to construct oneself as a subject closely resembling the heterosexual male fantasy. The stay-at-home girlfriend trend often feels less like rejection of neoliberalism and more like neoliberalism and cashmere loungewear. Matching, obviously. Why people are drawn to it anyway. Oh, I'm too tired for anything but scrolling right now. Wake me up when you've fought and achieved true equality, yeah? Despite all of this critique, I think it's important to acknowledge why people connect to these videos emotionally. Very fair, people are tired. They want gentleness, slowness, domestic safety, relief from constant crushing economic panic. And honestly, that desire is not embarrassing. The problem isn't wanting to rest, believe me, I have a chronic illness. I understand fatigue on a deep level. The problem is when rest becomes available only through romantic dependency. That's not liberation, that's privatized survival. The stay-at-home girlfriend trend sits at the intersection of burnout, femininity, capitalism, fantasy, fear. For some viewers, it represents softness and care. And for others, especially queer and disabled people, it can evoke vulnerability, exclusion, and old power structures dressed up in prettier lighting. That's the real question here. Not, should women stay home? But why does safety feel increasingly inaccessible without wealth, beauty, or dependence? Because a genuinely liberating future wouldn't require anyone to earn rest through desirability. It would make care, stability, and softness available to more people, not just the algorithmically beautiful ones. So, if you find yourself, my dear, as a stay-at-home girlfriend, and that's your choice, more power to you. Just, could you possibly keep a little bank account that's just yours, yeah? And keep putting money in it every month, just in case. And if nothing ever happens and he never leaves you, then lovely, you've got some money of your own. And if something does happen, then at least you can save yourself. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know, what do you think of soft life and stay-at-home girlfriend trends? Do you wish you could be one? Would you be happy to support one? And are you just really tired too? Thank you also to Verso for sponsoring this video. If you would like to check out FAQ 202 and other Verso bestsellers, click the link in my description box or scan this handy QR code. And don't forget to use my code JessicaKF for an extra 30% off on almost all Verso products. Leave a comment with which trend you would like me to cover next. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.